Hello and welcome to my channel. My name's Ali, and if you're new to my channel, I make lots and lots of content about chinchillas and all my other pets. So if that's something that interests you, please consider subscribing. So this video is part of a multi-part series on how to breed chinchillas safely. This is part 2, so if you haven't seen part 1, go and check it out. Link will be in the description of part 1. Please watch it before you watch this one because it will make a whole lot more sense. And also check out my video on the realities of being a chinchilla breeder, because that gives you some useful insights into actually what it's really like to breed chinchillas and whether you want to go into it or not. Now, a little bit about me. I am a chinchilla breeder and I've been breeding chinchillas for the past 23 odd years. So I have a little bit of insight and knowledge into how to actually breed them safely. Now that you've hopefully watched part 1, we're at the stage now where you have acquired some quality breeding chinchillas. Now the first thing you need to do is set up a breeding cage for your chinchillas, and this has to be a little bit smaller than a pet cage. Those double-storey cages are probably not going to be any good for breeding because they're a little bit too unsafe for a potentially pregnant female. So you want them in something a little bit smaller. A single critination cage would be fine, or something slightly smaller than that, but don't go too small because I just don't agree with cages that are too small. Next, you want to get a kit safe cage. Now you might be thinking a single critination cage might be okay for kits, but they're probably not. They're probably a little bit too tall. So with kit safe cages, what you're looking for is you're looking for something that's shorter. Now it can be as wide as you like, it can be as deep as you like, but it just needs to be shorter. And the reason for that is that chinchilla babies can climb from a very, very early age, from the first few hours of being born. And if they were to climb to the top of like a critination style cage, they could fall and then you could end up having injured kits. So yeah, it's really important just to reduce the height slightly. As I say, it doesn't really matter about width and depth, it's just about the height. And also with kit safe chinchilla cages, the bar spacing needs to be less than 3/4 of an inch. If it's any more than 3/4 of an inch, then you're going to have issues with babies actually escaping the cage, which you obviously don't want. So make sure you have both types of cages before you even start. So as I say, you've got your quality breeding animals. Next thing to say is, what age should you start breeding chinchillas? Now, if you're talking to breeders, they normally will say that you can actually start breeding them from 8 months old. However, I personally like to wait a year. Some breeders might say, why on earth are you waiting a year? 8 months is fine. But I just like to make sure that they're fully grown before I start breeding them. And also, I'm not massively invested in having lots and lots of kits. So I don't think it's like the 8 months old they've got going to breeding. I don't mind if I only have a few kits. I'm not in it for lots and lots of kits. So yeah, I personally wait a year, but you can do it from 8 months old. Some say even earlier. Chinchillas can actually get pregnant at a very, very young age. They can get pregnant at 3 months old, but obviously you wouldn't want to do that because they are still babies then. If a chinchilla becomes pregnant at just 3 months of age, then you're more than likely going to lose that chinchilla because they cannot cope with the pregnancy and giving birth as well. Okay, so your chinchillas are the right age. Next thing to do is to weigh your chinchillas. Now, chinchillas can't go into breeding unless they're over 600 grams, because 600 grams is overall decided that that is a healthy weight for a chinchilla. Anything less than that, you don't want to be putting them into breeding. So it's really important to weigh your chinchilla. The bigger the chinchilla, the better. Female chinchilla certainly has to be over 600 grams. Now, another thing you have to check before you actually put your chinchilla into breeding is you have to check the female's pelvic opening, because it needs to be large enough, because if it's too small, the chinchilla can have trouble giving birth and the chinchilla kits can get stuck if the pelvic opening isn't big enough. So it's really important to check that pelvic opening and make sure it's big enough. How do you check your pelvic opening? Well, I would show you, but I can't have chinchillas out today because it's too hot. But basically what you'd do is you'd hold your chinchilla, pull up the tail slightly and have a feel and see if you can feel how big it is between their pelvis. Now, obviously this video isn't going to show you how to do it, so if you've gone to a reputable breeder to get your chinchillas, ask the chinchilla breeder just quickly, how do I check their pelvic opening? And they should go through it with you, because I think it's far easier to have a live demonstration of how to do that rather than me when I haven't actually got a chinchilla that I can hold to show you the pelvic opening. So that is something you really do need to check. You need to make sure that pelvic area is big enough and large enough to be able to support a chinchilla kit passing through with ease. Now, this won't rule out the possibility of chinchillas not being able to give birth, chinchilla kits getting stuck, C-sections, all that kind of thing, but it can reduce it if you know that the pelvic area is actually big enough for them to hopefully be able to pass their chinchilla kits safely. Make sure you take a note of the chinchilla's weight as well, because that will help you in the future to determine whether the chinchilla is pregnant or not, because you'll know the starting weight and therefore you can compare and see if they're gradually gaining weight or not. Another thing you need to do is obviously introduce your chinchillas to each other. Now, the introductions are fairly similar to pet introductions, so it's the same sort of methods. There's two methods to do this. There is the side-by-side method, which will take a couple of weeks, or there is the smooshing method. Now, most breeders do actually prefer the smooshing method because it is very quick and you can determine whether a pair are compatible much easier and quicker than, say, the side-by-side method, because you can do the side-by-side method for a few weeks and then find out that they're not compatible, whereas the smooshing method, you will know within a few hours whether it's going to work out or not. So if you want to know about how to introduce chinchillas to each other, I do have a whole video dedicated to bonding chinchillas, and the process is exactly the same for breeding chinchillas as well as same-sex chinchillas, so it's the same process. So I'll link that in the description as well, that particular video, so you can go and have a look at that. I know with some animals, when you're breeding them, you can put them in together for a few weeks and then separate them because the job's done. But that is not the case with chinchillas. Chinchillas actually go into season maybe every 30 to 40 days. I normally say around once a month. It can be slightly longer, it can be slightly shorter, but as a general rule, around the 30-day mark, they normally cycle every 30 days or so. And during that time, there's only 2 days where a female can potentially become pregnant. So every 30 days, for 2 days out of that 30 days, the chinchilla may be able to become pregnant. You really just have to leave the male and female together for as long as it takes. Now, unless you actually see the mating occur, you may not even know that they've mated. But there are some signs that you can look out for. When a female goes into season, generally speaking, the male and the female are far more vocal than they normally are, a lot more squeaking going on. The male may start to chase the female, and also the male might start wagging his tail and might release scent, which you will actually be able to smell, and that's just to let the female know that he is here and he's ready to mate with her. And the female may also release scent and wag her tail. Now, the female may get a bit aggressive during this time because although they're in season, they may not want to mate with the male. So yeah, you just have to keep an eye on that. Another sign that a female has actually gone into season is if you find a heat plug. Now, a heat plug is just a waxy substance that comes out of the female's vagina when they are in heat. That's why it's called a heat plug, and it's almost like wax. It's little, they're normally about this big, and it looks just looks like wax really. So when the chinchillas have actually mated, you will see a second wax plug, and this is called the mating plug, and this is to say they've mated successfully. And if you see 2 wax plugs, then there's a good indication that your chinchilla may be pregnant. So if you hear the male hiccuping as well, that can be an indication that they have mated, because the males generally, not always, but sometimes will hiccup after mating. So that's a good indication that they may have done the deed. Now, this is if you see all these signs, and unfortunately sometimes, depending on what bedding you've got, the wax plugs can get lost in all the bedding, or sometimes the chinchillas eat their wax plugs because we don't know why, but sometimes they do, and you might not even see a wax plug at all. So if you don't see any of these signs, it doesn't mean that your chinchilla hasn't become pregnant. Now, chinchillas might not mate straight away. It can take over a year for a chinchilla to become pregnant. However, if you do see signs that a chinchilla has mated and then you write it on your calendar and then 111 days later they haven't had a kit, it may be a case that the female chinchilla may be infertile or the male chinchilla may be infertile. So yeah, it doesn't always happen straight away and you do have to be patient. If you don't know whether the female has in fact mated with the male, you can just regularly weigh them, and if you start to see the female chinchilla putting on weight, continuously putting on weight, then there's an indication that they may be pregnant. Now, if you've spotted any one of these signs, like you've seen them mating, you've seen what looks like mating behaviour, for example, extra vocal, chasing around the cage, potentially the male hiccuping, or if you find a heat plug, put it on your calendar. Now, chinchillas actually have a gestation period of 111 days, so mark on your calendar 111 days from the day you think they've mated, so you know roughly when she could give birth. It's 111 days, but it's a bit like humans. It can be late, it can be early. So yeah. So at this stage, don't take the male out unless you absolutely know that the chinchilla is in fact pregnant. But yeah, you can monitor it by weighing the chinchilla every couple of weeks or so, just to give an idea, are they putting on weight? Towards the end of pregnancy, it may become quite obvious that they are pregnant because they'll become quite lethargic, they'll look uncomfortable, they'll often be laying on their sides, and you may even see chinchilla kits kicking. Now, at the point where you see chinchilla kits kicking, you know they're going to be born within the next few weeks or so. You only really start to see chinchillas kicking in the last trimester, so the last stages of pregnancy. So once you can see your female chinchilla is actually gaining weight rapidly and that you're fairly certain that the chinchilla is pregnant, you might want to remove the dad then. You don't really want the dad in the cage through the birthing process because chinchillas can get pregnant straight away after giving birth. So you really don't want them getting pregnant straight away after they've just had a baby. This is called backbreeding, and it's something you really want to avoid because you want to give the chinchilla a break from breeding. So yes, remove the dad. Now, sometimes it is hard to tell whether a chinchilla is pregnant or not, in which case you may end up with the dad in the cage during the birthing process. Now, will this be an issue for the actual chinchillas? No, not really. The only issue is the fact that they can get pregnant straight away. The dads are actually normally really helpful during the birthing process. They will help clean the chinchillas, keep them warm, keep the kits warm. They don't attack the kits, and they will often look after the mother and the kits whilst she's giving birth, and they'll say he'll help clean them. They're actually really good dads, and they help the whole way along. However, the only reason why we remove the dad is because you don't want that female chinchilla getting pregnant straight away. That is one of the things that you have to do. So I think I'm going to leave the whole birthing process and what to do directly after they've given birth for another video. But this one is just during the pregnancy. So I hope this video has been helpful. If you like this video, please give a like and consider subscribing if you're not already for part 3. Goodbye for now.